But yeah, Pastor Grills, you were talking about vocation a lot, and I think that that was an excellent presentation on vocation when you were talking about those different vocations that we have in life. One thing that I was thinking about is how we sometimes kind of pigeonhole ourselves a little bit, I think, when we talk about vocation. And okay, you're a father, you're a mother, daughter, son, a wife, worker, employee, or employer. These types of like vocations that are maybe listed out on the table of duties or something like that. But if you think about like Luther's three estates, if people are familiar with that, you have home, church, and state or community. Especially on that community one of the vocations that maybe isn't like so particular. So you don't have like your vocation is not to go be friends with that particular person, or your vocation is not to have that particular job. Your vocation is to have a job and provide for your family, or to be a friend. How can we use those kind of broader vocations? I'm thinking especially of friendship, like out in the community. Like it's not mandatory that you go be friends with one particular person, right? That you come in contact with, but it is mandatory to some degree that you try and be friends with somebody, right?
Yeah.
And you try to build relationships with at least some people, right? So can you speak to that on like how can we use those maybe broader vocations to build relationships and have these evangelistic conversations and contend for the faith with people, even when it's like, oh, well, I don't have to go talk to that person because that's not my vocation. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So to answer that, and we'll keep it in the context of friendship because I think that's a little simpler to answer. Well, the first thing is you have to make friends, and so try that first. It's like that's why winkles sometimes feel like play dates or whatever. So first step, make a friend, whatever that looks like. Go watch Sesame Street if you need a refresher course or something. And then beyond that, then, that's where it can get, it's very situation dependent, right? So it is in the act of, so when you're having a conversation with a friend, it's important to make those meaningful. Now, that doesn't mean that every conversation is this big, deep thing. But by meaningful, I mean simply learning about them. Even if it starts out just as a hobby, right? Let's say you guys are into model railroads because, you're what, 60? So, and show actual interest in that and then develop that relationship from there. I think a sincere interest, because that's what friends do. And male friendships and female friendships are quite different. And I have a ton of jokes I would make with this, but again, cameras rolling, you won't be getting those. Those are behind the paywall. So beyond that, show a sincere interest in them, and then have those meaningful conversations so that when the time comes to have a real spiritual conversation, it doesn't come across as put on or like an agenda. Because sometimes what can happen is we meet somebody and we share a sincere interest, right? Like I'll go back to golfing, right? We're going to want to golf together, and we're going to do that, and we're going to drink whiskey, and we're going to golf, and we're going to gripe about politics, and we're going to talk about families in a positive way, and we're going to do this or that. But if we jump the gun and immediately it's like the guy tees off and you're like, hey, you're going to go to hell because of what. So we want to develop real and open friendships. Now, there is still an urgency to the gospel. We can do this the wrong way and just be like, well, I never talked about Jesus because it never came up. We were always just talking about Skinnerd or something like that. And so I think that the key to that with friendship is to develop sincere bonds, and they can be bonds over seemingly inconsequential things. So like when you're in the dojo, or they call it that with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when we weebs call it a dojo. We Kinjitsu enjoyers. But anyway,
just as long as it's not a big dojo.
Well, look, pay to play, But anyway, you're there because of that shared interest in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And it's got to be sincere. And we've all seen examples, or maybe we've seen examples where somebody came, but they had ulterior motives. Now, wanting to share the gospel is not necessarily an ulterior motive, but we need to show them that we're their friends no matter what. I mean, even if somebody doesn't want to hear the gospel or denies the gospel, we can still be a friend to them. Now, I know that that gets a little complicated because what fellowship has light with darkness, but I'm using friend in a very general term here. We can still be a sincere, good friend to that person, even if they don't believe the gospel. And I think they need to see that first, that we're actually interested in them. Um, and again, there's nothing wrong with having um, non-spiritual conversations sometimes, because that's what helps prepare the way in a similar way to where the food bank might be able to prepare the way for somebody to hear the gospel in a indirect way. Does that make sense? Does that kind of answer the question? Yeah, just be. It goes back to what if I keep saying, be a human being. We'll try that on.
Friendship is not fake. It's not like you're only being their friends so that you can eventually
Exactly.
make the switch.
Yeah, it's kind of like a friendship version of a rice Christian or something like that, which is apparently a very pejorative term, and nobody told me that in the big book of things I shouldn't say. But basically, that's the concept of you go to be missionaries in some foreign country where there's famine. If you convert, we'll give you food. You don't really become a friend or an asset to them. And so to kind of take it in the friendship way, well, I've only ever really been talking to you so that I can get you in the church on Sunday. Now, ultimately, that can be a goal. We would love to see them, but you can still have a sincere friendship, and that needs to build up first. So just be a bro. Be a bro.
So at the very beginning, you talked about the demographics of the area that we live in being primarily Southern Baptist. So do you have anything specific with how a Lutheran talks to a at least cultural Southern Baptist, if not
Yeah.
technically that's different, that would be helpful to kind of bridge that gap?
So I would say that when you're talking to most Baptists, their chief tenet is justification by grace through faith. And they see in our soteriology a denial of that, because we believe that salvation comes through means. And for them, the ordinances, as they would call them, like baptism, are things that we do. So it's an outward sign of an inward change. I think when dialoguing with Baptists, we need to highlight grace and how it comes. And I've had that be really rather effective with them to say, no, we have a fundamentally different view of what baptism is. So meet them in the middle. We all agree that preaching is a means of grace. And so we believe that somehow through pastor whatever, that God works through that word to bring about the conviction of sin and to bring about the gospel. So you could say, well, is that now salvation by works? Because Pastor Fred had to get up there and say something, but nobody calls that salvation by works. To show them that no, baptism really has nothing at all to do with us. It is simply the means by which God has ordained to bring grace to us, and to really highlight that we really do believe that salvation is by grace through faith, and it comes in these very passive ways. So I would say you agree that it can come by the ear, but why then could it not come through the mouth in the case of the sacrament? Why couldn't it come through water? And then maybe that would open up an opportunity to actually look at the text and go, okay, what are the texts saying? The texts say baptism now saves you. How does it do that? Because it's the gracious work of God. So just like how he was converting the people in Acts through that preached word, he's also bringing about the completion of that preaching, of that grace, through water here. And in that great mystery, God chose to do it that way. And Acts is a good one because you have both means of grace right there. You have the preached word and they're convicted. What should we do? He gives them the gospel. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, be baptized. For what reason? For the remission of sins. But if we lean on grace, if we don't, so with a Baptist, I wouldn't get bogged down on form and mode of baptism, because that's just sort of a losing battle. Because the substance of baptism isn't the mean or the mode, but rather what it does. And if we can highlight to them that everything we do is about grace, that every aspect of salvation is not dependent upon us, but upon the gracious work of God, I've had that be more effective with Baptists. Now, they don't come around always to being Lutheran, but they see, okay, they'll at least sometimes concede, okay, well, that's not what I thought it was. We thought that it was, I've really got to do this if I want to be saved. I've got to have water put on me, and that's me choosing to do this. But if we say, no, it's actually not that. This is simply the means that God has ordained for salvation. and it is his gracious will to do it that way, the same way that he works through preaching. I've really seen that sort of open the eyes of them some. Sometimes they even convert, but that's really just lean on grace and lean on the passivity of salvation.
I was just going to amplify that. I watched a Brian Wolfmueller video this morning that I saw years ago, and he's talking about how he met a Baptist lady at McDonald's, and she asked, really, what's the difference between Lutherans and Baptists? He said, normally I would say something about law and gospel, but for some reason I said to her, well, in your Baptist church, you have a moment in your service where you do a altar call, right? And people come and give their life to Jesus. She's like, yeah, we do. Well, we Lutherans, instead of looking at ourselves, we look at that Jesus gave his life for us. And similarly, in the Baptist church, you give your heart to Jesus. We Lutherans celebrate the fact that Jesus gives his heart to us. So in prayer, we in prayer and the prayer life and all that, it's Jesus. It is something about monergism versus synergism.
Yeah.
And as we were talking earlier, I see since I'm in Mississippi from the Dakotas where we have no Baptists, everybody was Lutheran or Catholic. I see so many people, especially at work, who have left the faith because of synergism and that cross, that yoke that is not light, and the hypocrisy they see, the things they tell me to learn. It's just, they're full born, full.
Yeah, and that is one of the tragic things about this is people can become completely, antagonistic toward any form of Christianity once they've been through that. And sometimes those are the hardest nuts to crack. Thankfully, sometimes they come back after a sojourn, but a lot of times the hardness of heart is already there, and it's really hard to bring them back. And we're going to see more of that as this plays out, I think, with cultural implications and all sorts of other things. It's something we're going to have to learn. We're going to have to learn how to talk to people like that and sort of reorient their thinking. So,
in your opinion, this evangelical Christian environment where we are, does it help us or hurt us as we evangelize? And why?
oh, well, that's a good question. I get the easy one and go, well, it depends, right? No. So the question is basically this evangelical kind of generic Christian environment that we live in, does it help or hurt us as we evangelize? Is that a good summary? Yeah. So I'm a little bit probably biased on this because I came to the faith later, but like a lot of kids who grew up in the Bible Belt, you got dragged around to every VBS. You had an aunt or an uncle who would drag you to Sunday school. I think in the current year, for what it's worth, I think it can kind of hurt us because they assume that we are just like every other Protestant church out there. And so the wall is already up. And so that's why, like Mark was saying, it's important for us to highlight salvation coming from outside of us it's really up to us to set the stage for how the conversation is going to go, because so many of these people who are ex-evangelicals or current evangelicals come with a lot of theological presuppositions. And a lot of times the catechesis in those churches is so thin that they just assume everybody's either Protestant or Catholic and all Protestants are like X. They're this way. So I think right now it really does create a wall that we have to overcome. Now, for some people, however, it's a benefit to us because they believe the gospel, they have Christ, but they're wanting something different. They're wanting something closer to what they're seeing in the scriptures, closer to historic Christianity. And so when we meet those cases, like the disaffected evangelicals who are still, their faith is still in Christ, but they're kind of like adrift at sea, we can be the life preserver to pull them back in. So it can be a positive in that sense. But I think for the most part, at least in my experience, what we're seeing are people who are disaffected by this. Because that's kind of what I saw as a kid. Church ended up just being a place where, you dropped your kids off for free babysitting or something like that, or a place where you learn how to be good citizens. And the Boy Scouts can give you that, right? We really didn't see it as a place that was fundamentally different from any other civic organization, except they talked about Jesus sometimes. And so right now, I would just say generally, for the people who are disaffected, or even for the people who are really entrenched in evangelicalism or just kind of a generic Protestant Christianity, that there is a wall built up, and we have to. I think it's up to us to jump over that wall, because they're not going to jump over onto our side. We've got to come over and find them and kind of show them the biblical way. If that makes sense. Yeah. So I'll paraphrase that question as, how do we increase visibility so that people know we're even an option? Yeah. That's something that I neglected to mention in the presentation that I should have, because that is of paramount importance. And it sounds like kind of a worldly thing, but it's a necessary thing. Nobody's going to come if they don't know that you're there. So one, make sure you're updated on Google Maps. I know it sounds silly, but make sure your address is correct. Two, make sure your church sign is visible. Three, since we do live in the current year, try to have a robust media presence or social media presence. I know we all hate Facebook and things like that, and we should, but it's kind of a necessary evil today. We need to take control of that narrative. And I think we are to some degree with podcasts, and there are certain names and personalities, some of them mentioned here, but we need to be very intentional about that, because when people begin to look into, say, a liturgical church body or historic Christianity, in America, Lutheran is not near the top options when they think about it. The first option they think of is Catholicism. And then honestly, it's probably like the Episcopalians. The Orthodox seem like they're more of an option, but that's because they are absolutely better than most at social media and what they're doing. So they're seeing percentage-wise a lot of growth, but if you look at the numbers, it's still a relatively small number. But nevertheless, they're still one of the top three when people think. Nobody knows what a Lutheran is. And so we have got to be proactive about, like, hey, here's what we are. And so having an updated website, being out there, podcasting if you have to, not to the dereliction of duty at the local level, but maybe media geared toward, say Jonesboro or things like that. That's the temptation with social media and podcasting, and the great danger is a wannabe celebrity culture or wannabe influencer culture. And as the church goes, we can't focus on that. We are not called to the world. We're called to our local parishes, right? And I'm using parish in the classic term, the geographic location. And so I would counsel a robust outreach that focuses a bit on advertising, despite everything I said about advertising, but just for the sake of knowing that we're there. One of the things my church in particular has a problem with is our address, our mailing address, our street address is in Alexander, Arkansas. But the actual Alexander is like 30 minutes south of us. It's like through an accident of the post office. And so people are always getting us mixed up with a completely different Lutheran church that's a half an hour away. And it really hurts us, because the post office in 1899 made a poor decision and drew a postal map that looks like a crescent moon. And so, I can't fix that without petitioning them. And Sawyer can, exactly what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we're very intentional about, we're here. So we're Zion Lutheran Church, but we also have to tack on of a villa so people know we're way up north, not way down south. Now that's unique to us, but it's an example of why even Google Maps is very important. So if you're traveling, how many times does this happen? You're looking for a church and you go to the LCMS locator or whatever, and then you get maybe 3 churches, maybe 37 if you're in Wisconsin or something, and half the churches have a dead link for their website. The Facebook page hasn't been updated. You have no idea what service times are. And then even if you can, it's hard to figure out, is this a confessional Lutheran church? What is this? What kind of church are we even getting here? So we need to be really out there showing people what we are. And so like your website, and you do a good job with this, can be very good. You click on it, you click on All Saints, you know exactly what kind of church you're going to get. And so that's for the inquirers. But to reach out for the people who don't even think that we're an option, we really have to look at kind of a robust media blitz, if that makes sense.
I think that's right. We've started doing like some radio ads and some of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can name, 4 or 5 people off the top of my head in the past 4 years that told me that they were just like this close to being Roman Catholic
Yeah.
because they didn't know we were an option. Kind of last minute,
Yeah.
someone said, "Hey, check out the Lutheran Church,"
Right.
and they're just overjoyed to find all the great stuff about about Roman Catholicism.
Yeah. Well, and on that, one of the things that we have to do now, almost every time, is to be like, oh, we're not like those other Lutherans, because every time a Lutheran makes the news, it's because of something the ELCA is doing that we wouldn't approve of, and somebody that's looking for historic Christianity that wants no part of, and we'll figure out a good way other than saying, like All Saints, Lutheran Church, LCMS, not ELCA. We'll find a better way to promote that, but we kind of have to do that, so there is some confusion out there. So, yeah. So the question is, I'm going to paraphrase, does the magistrate have a role in enforcing God's moral law? Is that how you would say it in so many words? Yeah. All right, I'll answer it this way, because I'm primarily known as an historian, and if I say, well, they used to do it this way in Saxony, I'm usually pretty safe. So here's the facts, and I know that right now it's in vogue to say that the government has nothing to do with the law or anything like that, but historically that's not been true. Historically in Christianity, once the governors, emperors, whatever they were converted to Christianity, they began to immediately protect Christianity and to outlaw certain blasphemous things. So there's nothing inherently immoral about that. And I don't know how we can make the case that it is immoral, because Luther endorsed this. Now, the question is, in cases of church discipline, is it right for the state to administer that? I would argue that that is only the domain of the church. So that said, every government enforces God's moral law to one degree or another. Okay, there are laws against murder. That comes from the Decalogue. That comes from creation. So a magistrate is enforcing God's law whether they realize it or not. So then the question becomes, well, what does that mean for America, who is allegedly pluralistic and secular? So part of the problem with this debate is people are trying to import 16th century ethics onto America. Well, the difference between 16th century Europe and present-day America is that the princes and magistrates held all of the political power. The regular people did not really have a role in that. And so we don't really know what to do in a democracy or a democratic republic. So then there's the question, should Christians vote for legislation that favors what God says? And I think the answer should be yes. And even the people that would disagree with me actually do agree with me, because the same people were fighting for biblical marriage 10 years ago. But all of a sudden, we turned around and said, nope, the civil magistrate has nothing to say about morality. But any enforcement of law is an enforcement of morality at some level. Now, do we want a theocracy? Well, not necessarily in Mississippi, because I don't know that I would be free to be Lutheran in a Baptist theocratic state. But the general principle of, can the government in any respect enforce the law of God? Well, they do. I mean, any enforcing of any moral law that is in accord with what God has laid down is becoming the sword in Romans 13. And so there's a way in which we can say that. Now, the difference then between 16th century and today, for us in our context, is that we have a participatory part to play as citizens. And so then a Christian has to then decide with their own discernment, without endorsing any candidate or anything like that, what their conscience can allow them to do, which is virtually unheard of in world history. You look at the Bible and the New Testament specifically, they had to do what the emperor said. And then when their conscience said, this is against the law of God, I can't burn incense or whatever, of course, they rebelled. That was rebellion against the government because it made them violate the law of God. In the fullness of time, however, especially with Constantine and then with every Christian ruler after that, they were happy to be under benevolent emperors who obeyed the law of God and honored the law of God. So now it's tricky because they could at least say, well, this emperor is good, and so we praise God. And then they would say, this emperor is bad, but we have to honor him because he's the emperor. But now we're in a position to say, this person may or may not be better for the church, and I have to decide who to pull the lever for. And so a lot of our documents, our confessional documents, speak to a very different political orientation from what we have today. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable for Christians to vote for magistrates who will honor the commandments. Now, I'll stop just short of saying what you want me to say, which is to enforce, state Christianity or something like that. But I think we can at least come to an agreement that, at least as far as the moral law goes, the government does not wield the sword in vain, and ideally, they would be living in accord with God. And so it doesn't have to just be marriage. It can be murder. There are states where you get more crime for white collar crimes than you do for murder, more time, I mean. And that would not be in accord probably with Christian principles. So it's perfectly reasonable for a Christian to want a government that is more conducive to what Christianity teaches, the law that God has laid down. And to say otherwise is to really endorse some kind of anarchy. And I don't believe that Christians can endorse that. I don't think we should be openly affirming laws which directly contradict God's law, if that makes sense. So, good question. Yeah, so good question. So basically, it's how do we discern demographics and what do we do with it, right? So that is very location dependent and maybe even individual dependent. So we'll start with location. You're probably in an area, just reading the tea leaves here, where ex-evangelicals are probably what you're more likely going to encounter. That's probably what we should be sharpening our swords for and being prepared to answer. Now, you could have a particular job, though, where you're employed by a certain group and you do have a lot of Buddhists. And at that point, you got to start reading the books, figuring out what they believe and the Christian response to it. But I think just in general, living in Mississippi, be ready to answer those evangelicals or ex-evangelicals. But if you were on the West Coast, well, it could be any number of things, right? So, and that really comes back to the knowing your neighbor thing. And you can get a lot through demographic studies as a kind of a baseline, but once you get out and start meeting them, that's when you can really tailor that response. And we can only really do that effectively when we know them. So, yeah, the balance between, living in the world and not being of the world and questions of community. There is a push among a small subset of Lutherans to build a community completely separate from the world and to try to build, say, Lutheran villages and things like that. I like the idea in spirit. However, I don't know that that's what God has called us to. And to me, that comes a little bit too close to trying to build a utopia. And anytime people have tried that, it has failed. So we need to build communities, but we're building communities within our own communities. And so think of it like a big umbrella. And our local congregation is the umbrella. And we live under that primarily. And really prioritize the fellowship there while still being productive members of society. We are called to be salt and light, and if we're not careful, we can retreat too far that nobody will ever see the light. It becomes hiding it under a bushel basket. All the well, that's the words of Jesus, but I was going to make fun of the songs that we all had to learn in VBS. But there's a point to it. So I think the healthy way for us to withdraw is to withdraw spiritually and according to, say, our prayer life and according to our emphases. So we withdraw from the world. We are going to reckon that this world is passing away, because it is. And we're going to live as people who are not afraid of death and who are not afraid of what the world can give and are not tempted by what the world can give, because the world is going to pass away. Whatever treasures you build up, you can't take it with you. So we're going to build communities that have that in mind, but that are not afraid to engage the people who are outside of it. There were probably times in history where retreating was the right thing to do. And I'm not even talking about monasteries here or things like that, but where, at least for a time, for the safety of the flock, we're going to sort of go behind the wall here for a little. We keep using walls. Everybody's going to think this is a MAGA presentation or something. But so we go into the fortress for a while and kind of build things up. But I think if we do that, that should be a temporary solution. Just a temporary, kind of like where, like in 1 Corinthians, a couple may withdraw from each other for a time of prayer and fasting. I think that our withdrawals, total withdrawals, should always be temporary, and with an aim toward re-engaging society again. So we prioritize our collective time together, and really make that church home our broader home. And then that way we're not going to be like going off on our own, feeling as if we're the only Christians in the world, and we'll be better prepared then to collectively fight whatever evils the world brings about, if that makes sense. Yeah. But community is of the utmost importance. So we have to still build that. And unfortunately, we've fallen into one of two camps, which is total retreat from society or total lone wolf Christianity. And I don't think either of those are quite what the Bible envisions for us. But a strong backbone of community that is there shoring up one another, but keeping us still ready to engage the world when we need to. Yeah, so the question is, how do we give the gospel to people who are afraid that will push them away? I think first and foremost, we have to begin to pray for that person and earnestly pray for that person, because only God's going to, break that stony heart up. So bathe everything in prayer, which we could always do more of. And then, honestly, I believe it's like, in a lot of cases, just jumping into the deep end of the pool and having that conversation anyway. So pray earnestly for that salvation of that person, and then go for it. Because if we don't, typically what I end up seeing is that it's just kind of like membership rolls, right? We know we need to get them back, but it's a big job, so we just keep kicking the can down the road until it's convention time and we want to talk about it again because it costs us money to keep them on the rolls. We pray about it, and then we go for the gusto is really the best. Because, like I said, the other option is to just sort of let it go. Now, unless there's a reason, like a tactical reason, we'll say, like, okay, I'm going to give it this much time. And there may be a time where that's okay. But again, anything could happen to that person. And so we don't want to just drag it out forever and then lose that opportunity. So give it up to God, trust God to prepare us, trust God to prepare them, and then go for it. And we've got a weapon that can overcome anything. Yeah, the world's painting us as bigots and all of these things. And that's usually in the context of LGBT or something like that nowadays. In that case, they're going to hear this negatively no matter what we say. And so we can be winsome, which we probably should try, but we'll take with the LGBT thing. We lean on creation, that we believe firmly that God has made us this way, and that God has designed marriage to be man and woman for life, and that through that's the way he orders society, that we are conscience bound to not be able to do that. In the culture we live in, the culture of outrage, even explaining that in the kindest way possible is still going to make them angry, because anger and outrage is seen as a virtue today. So I don't think we have a really easy way to do that other than just simply standing on it. And while we stand on it, to make sure that we are living by it. Because what they're waiting to trap you in is, well, you believe in marriage, but look at your marriage, or something like that. We want to make sure that we are living as Christian men and women together. And so at least we're consistent, and they'll call us hypocrites anyway. You can't really win with these groups. And so we just stand firm on that, try to explain it as kindly as we can in the context of God's design and what is best for us. And, a lot of these people deep down really know that the world is disordered. And they're angry because, again, anger is a virtue for them, outrage is a virtue, but they're mad at God and they don't even know it. And so, yeah, we explain that God does have standards and God does have rules, but at the same time, God loves us and he is virtuous. And just like a loving father would do, sometimes what is best for us is not what's palatable to us. Sometimes what's best for us is the hard thing to do. And even that lesson is hard for people to understand because we know God often through analogy, right? I mean, he is our Father, but when we think of, for example, like these same people, they don't have great relationships with their fathers. And so they hear father and rules, and all they hear is stern taskmaster. They hear, mean old guy up in the sky. And so we present them with a merciful God, a God who loves us, and a God who loves us in spite of our bad decisions, and a God who does correct us, and we welcome that chastisement, and to kind of show them that this is what a good father does. This is what a good judge does. He has a standard, and he calls us to it, and he knows we're stumbling, and we're not perfect. We are sinners first and foremost, chief of sinners, and yet he's continually forgiving us. And every time we go back to him and we're sorry, God forgives us, and God gives us another chance and sends us on our way. And that he's not angry with us. He wants what is best for us. And what a loving father does a lot of times is he's not Santa Claus. Sometimes a loving God is the one who is a little bit stern and corrective. And a lot of times people can't understand that because they have no reference for what a father is supposed to be. And so I think putting in the context of a loving father and what a father is supposed to do, it might not convince that person, but I think at least it sort of paints the picture a little more fully, because it's usually just big, mean, bearded guy up in the sky for a lot of them. And that's usually how they paint God. And so he is our father, even where our fathers might fail. And this is what a father is supposed to do. So, but an excellent question. Yeah. So how to explain to a Baptist or Southern Baptist the Lutheran doctrine of baptism? Again, we're going to go back to it is grace, that baptism is not our work. And then, so we've got that right there. And then we go to the scriptures and show clearly what the scriptures say. And it's a remarkable thing because for most of you in here, these aren't hard verses. Baptism now saves you. Okay? You go to, okay, case closed, right? But I think for them, you really have to prime them with this is God. This is how God is choosing to work, just like he works through the preached word. The principle is the same. Baptists agree that God works through means. Now, they might not use that exact language, but they absolutely agree that through the preacher, the gospel comes. Okay, now we're going to say, yeah, absolutely, God works through that. But here's the other way in which he works. And here's what scripture says about it. Baptism now saves you. Repent and be baptized in the name of Jesus for remission of sins. Those who have been baptized into Christ's death have been united to Christ. Those sorts of things. Very clear verses. But what we often forget, and this is the case with the debate between like a secularist, like what you're talking about, a Baptist over here, they come with these presuppositions. And they are very, very hard to overcome. When you have been taught since you were a child in a Baptist church that baptism now saves you doesn't mean literally what it says, no matter how clear it is, it's hard to overcome that. But we have to lean on that. And really, a lot of times for the Baptists who are converted over to a sacramental understanding, it just takes reading and rereading it over and over until God finally lets the scales fall from their eyes and they're like, oh, there it is. That was the case with me. I wasn't a Baptist. I was a Shiite Presbyterian. And I know our Presbyterian God will say there are more Presbyterians out there now saying that baptism remits sins, but in the main, they still want to mostly deny that or have a lot of different caveats there. If you can just let it say that, because I can remember this, thinking through this thing and saying, well, when Peter says in Acts 2, be baptized for the remission of sins, in the Greek, it can be either for or because. So you're being baptized because of remission of sins. And you get to like, well, you're still right there anyway. And so you're getting into these sort of verbal gymnastics to try to fight against the clear meaning of Scripture. And so eventually what has to happen is the Baptist just lets the word be the word. And I do think that we have a leg up over them. See, what they see in our churches externally is a lot of tradition piled upon tradition. We have chasubles, okay? We chant sometimes. We have a set liturgy. So in their conception, oftentimes, not every Baptist, but a lot of Baptists, they think, well, we're Protestants. Yeah, they believe in justification by faith, but they never got over the Catholic baggage. They never got down to pure undistilled Christianity is really the viewpoint there. And we do actually have the scriptures on our side. And so when we're contending with those Baptists, one of the best things we can do is to know the scriptures very well, to know it better than them. And the good news is we can just let it sort of sit. Baptism now saves you. Case closed. Now, it should be case closed. We've been trying this with the bodily presence of Christ in the supper with for about 5 centuries now. And it's not really hit home yet, but that's really what we have to do. Highlight again God working through the means of grace that they agree upon, and then be like, yeah, but what does the Bible clearly say? And now for me as a Lutheran pastor, obviously it's harder and harder as the years go by to put myself in their shoes and try to read the scriptures that way, because it's so unnatural. It's so unnatural to read Romans 6 and come away and go, oh yeah, baptism means nothing. Or to read Peter, baptism now saves you. Oh yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that. So we have to just simply lean on God working through means. And then if they can come over to the idea that, yeah, God does work through means, then it starts to make more sense. Then, okay, yeah, they might not agree with it, but they can hypothetically say, well, I guess if God can work through preaching, then maybe he can work through water and the word too. Because the word is always there. If you pour water on somebody or dunk somebody in water and don't have the triune name, you don't have a baptism, right? So the word is always there. And so we lean heavily on the performative word and the active word. And that will help them. And to let them know that, again, this is not our doing. It is just what God has ordained to do. And then that's a question that we can't answer. Well, why did God choose it to be that way? I don't know. Let God do what he wants to do. And that's really what embracing the clear meaning of Scripture is letting God be God and letting God's word speak clearly. The book can be very complicated, but we really overcomplicated ourselves sometimes out there, especially in the broader Christian world. Baptism now saves you, easy. But then the world comes along and goes, well, hath God indeed said? And then sometimes our objectors sound a little like a snake that I knew about one time. Unintentionally, of course, but a theological presupposition is basically a grid through which Scripture is interpreted. And so the guiding principle is God can only work this way. And so if the Scriptures say otherwise, well, obviously it can't mean that. And so really it's more about unlocking the key of Scripture. And it just takes a lot of patience. But I've seen it happen. I've seen Baptists flip, or I've seen Baptists also, sort of not agree with us, but come around and go, okay, I can see that. But then go back to altar calls, Yeah, so we got her, and then I'll get you.
So we have a daughter in that very community we're talking about, and I'm not quiet about it. I mean, I don't tell everybody, but if somebody brings it up, I don't hide it. And so I get to talk to a lot of people who have that opinion that Christians are haters and that we just don't understand. But so it's in the way that they see that I still love my daughter, and my heart is broken for my daughter, and I pray for my daughter, and I let them see that happening. Like I work in the medical field also, so I'm in constant contact with people in that. And so that is how I don't have to have an argument with them. They might start out that way when Christians are haters or bigots or whatever, but then if you don't live like you're a hater and bigot, but still holding on to your Christian beliefs and principles, like this is what God says man and woman is, that's probably the best way, because you can't win an argument with a person who has thrown logic out the window and only wants to be angry.
Yeah.
Because I am a former Baptist. The big thing for me wasn't necessarily baptism, infant baptism, or communion, but sacrament.
Yeah.
So there is a positive way to approach a Baptist sacrament. The moment that a Baptist, in my opinion, based on my experience, sees, understands, and accepts sacrament, then the work
It opens up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
in my encounter with the doctrine of sacrament, it was in doing music for divine service.
Mhm.
So the baptism and communion, they might hurt, but the positive way sacrament, because we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're saying. Like you have to, highlight that this is the vehicle by which grace arrives at a person. Yeah. Yeah, very good question, and one of the more difficult ones to actually solve is how do we get younger people in? Very simple math. We don't have younger people. We don't have a church in a generation, right? So one, we need to be very accommodating to families. So, well, actually, first let me answer it and kind of go back to your question. One, again, visibility, knowing we're an option, all of those. But let's say we can get them in the door, because it's kind of a question of retention, which is really the most important thing. I fundamentally believe this. We have to work on retention. Decisions, quote unquote, are relatively easy. It's retention that's hard. So all these big churches that you see with all these young families, statistically, have just as many people going out the back door as coming in the front door. So retention is always a tricky one. We need to be accommodating to young families, and so avoid the horror stories, right? So the baby's crying in the pew. We don't want somebody going and tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, it's time to step outside or something like that. I mean, the obvious ones. Now, this is where a temptation comes in, and I hear this often. Well, we need more, again, activities to engage young people. They've got enough activities anyway. If you have a kid in 2024, they're as busy as they can be anyway. So one of the pluses that we have is that we actually do believe in cradle to the grave faith, right? You can become a Christian as a baby. So we want to highlight that, let them know that their infants are just as much children of God as an 80-year-old person in the pews. The second is we need to be encouraging these young families and not shaming them. If you see a family with, nowadays it's like 3 or more kids is considered huge. You don't discourage them. Don't walk up to the poor little homeschooling wife with 5 kids in tow at Walmart and go, you know what causes that, right? We don't want to do that. We should be overjoyed when we see larger families. And I would say that as Christians and as pastors, we should encourage that as much as possible. We have sterilized, and I mean this kind of literally, ourselves out of the next generation. For all of our talk about evangelism, throughout history, there have been these great waves where we had many conversions. But in a lot of cases, and in the normal way, we got more Christians by Christians and husbands and wives having children and raising them as Christians. And so I know people, like, we're not, it's become kind of like something we roll our eyes at, but we actually do need Christians to reproduce, and so we encourage that rather than discourage it. We make the church accessible for children, not with children's church, but with putting up with a crying baby, and not. I mean, the cry rooms need to be there because moms need a place to run. And I say moms because my wife's a single mother every Sunday, right? And so is Sawyer's and most of the other pastors here. So we make those really safe places where they are honored. There is hardly any place in the world where people with young families are truly honored and seen as the gifts they are outside of the Christian church. Unless it's the daycare or the school that you're paying tuition to. They're really happy to have them. And so we plug them in there and just help them out. If they're comfortable with it, go grab one of the babies, whether they're squalling or not, right? Little things like let older folks here become surrogate grandparents. Be an indispensable part of their lives. More experienced parents, help them out. Don't go over and go, I could help you be a better parent. You kind of suck right now, or don't do it that way, but go over to them and just be a kind person to them and make them feel as if they're part of the family and that their family's welcome there. And I know that sounds a little like Hallmark card evangelism stuff, but I really do firmly believe that this is the way to go. I don't think children's church is the answer or anything like that, but I think we could go a long way just to not discourage them. And again, if we highlight what we have too, because they'll be tempted eventually by the big church down the street with the daycare program on Sunday mornings. But we got to show them that this is part of being a parent, and this may be your cross to bear. If you've had any 2 or 3-year-old, you know what I'm talking about. And every child is like born with their own personality. And well, I won't use personal examples because then my kids will find the YouTube video, right? But you know, you get the one kid, like the first kid, they're easy and everything. Oh, it's a breeze. And then the second or third one comes along, and it's the Tasmanian devil for about 7 years. Um, we've got to encourage those parents and go, you know, this too shall pass, right? And so just make that be grandma and grandpa to them, and be, you know, and pastors, you know, encourage that. Let them know that they're doing what the Lord has called them to do, and just really make that a place for them, because more and more big families just don't, like, try to find van parking. You know, if your family is big enough or something like that, it becomes extraordinarily hard. So make it accessible and make it safe. And anytime you see a baby freaking out or a toddler freaking out, remember they're they're a child of God too, and they've been baptized and they've been redeemed. And when you throw a fit, God sees that, and you look like that little child throwing a tantrum to him, and he doesn't, you know, kick you out either. So just help them along, I think, would be the way, and show them that the Lutheran Church is the place for young families. The Lutheran Church is the place that you want to be, because in the Lutheran Church, those kids can grow up right alongside of you as full members of the household, of the household of God, that they are just as much a part of it, have just as much right to be there. And yeah, they're a little bit annoying, but it's kind of funny when they rattle pastor when he's trying to preach, right? And so we can, you know, we can find our benefits there. So, all right. I think we are at time.